What's up, and welcome back to Mental Edge Training Coach here with Chad Hermansen. Today, I'm going to be talking with Kai Correa. Kai is the Major League infield coach for the San Francisco Giants. He's one of the best infield instructors in the game right now. Met him at the University of Northern Colorado when he was still a college coach. He has some amazing insights about proper fielding technique, how to get it done. He shares his story with us as well. So enjoy this conversation with Kai Correa. All right, Kai Correa, what's going on, man?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So where are you from? Well, I'm calling you and you're in what, Fort Collins, Colorado?
I am in Fort Collins, Colorado. That's where I live in the off season.
Nice. Tell us how you got out there.
So obviously, I coached at the University of Northern Colorado. That was my Division I coaching stop, which is in Greeley, Colorado. 25 minutes from here. And I married a gal from Fort Collins, and her family's here, and so this is where we make our off season home.
Very good. So she said there's no way I'm going to a warmer climate spot in the off
Yeah,
season.
no shot. We negotiated potentially Hilo, Hawaii, my hometown, but that's not a hop, skip, and a jump away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
DIA to all the National League cities is pretty easy, far easier than Hilo is.
That's right. That's right. Well, I met you a few years back when I was scouting, and you were at Northern Colorado, and you were an assistant coach running the infield program over there. But we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit. I'm really curious and interested about, how did Kai Correa become a coach? What was your route to get to where you are today, which is a big league infield coach? But where did this all start for you?
It starts with my roots as a kid, right? I grew up in Hilo, Hawaii. My grandfather was a longtime high school coach. My father, my uncle, my cousins were high school coaches. And so coaching was the family business, right? And so when you're the son of a coach and the grandson of a coach, you're going to have a really extremely negative association with it or an extremely positive association with it. And fortunately for me, my experience was largely positive. And so I wanted to be like them.
Mm.
And then it also kind of expedited my baseball education, because now you're sitting on the bucket, you're sitting on the bench with longtime baseball men talking about whether you should take the pitcher out or not, talking about whether they're going to hit and run, talking about whether we should throw through or return or pump fake and throw to third, right? And so you're getting to hear these nuanced conversations that a lot of young players aren't privy to, and it gave me a kind of a coach's lens into playing, as opposed to a player's lens into playing, which was very fortunate because I wasn't that great of a player. And so from Hawaii, I was fortunate enough to play at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. And there I continued to kind of, broaden my baseball horizons by coaching in the off season. And so I coached at a facility called Boys of Summer, that back in like the 90s was called Poseboro RV, and they had Jason Hamill and Lincecum and Lillibridge and a lot of those like Northwest names of your generation
Right.
in the major leagues. They were from up there and they played at that facility. And so that's where I kind of got to get my start into coaching in summers and off seasons, between playing in college. And then at the end of my college playing career, my head coach Brian Billings offered me the opportunity to be the infield coach, and I said yes on the spot. I said I'm in, and then I found out that I got $3,500 a season, but 3,500 was more than zero, and so I continued to coach summer ball. I gave lessons, and at this point when I first started coaching, now over 12, 13 years ago, that was the dawn of tech and modern coaching in terms of hitting and pitching.
Right.
But infield play was still sacred. Team defense was still sacred. Base running was still sacred. It was still about effort and attention to detail and quantity reps and quality reps. And so I was drawn to that because it was the way I was educated into baseball. And so I had that very traditional old school route in terms of my baseball education, and it fit into the defense and base running and infield play. But then at the same time, I also sought things that were measurable to make infield like hitting was being measured, to make infield like pitching was being measured, and to have some science into the development and blend the two, because I understood that the modern player, they want to know why, right? They wanted explanations. They want progress to be shown that you give lessons. The modern parent also wants to know why, and they want updates. And so I was constantly trying to take things from pitching and from hitting and from other sports and kind of push things forward and use film and use charts to also, you know, measure the old school infield values that I believe in. And so at the University of Puget Sound, to subsidize my income, I started doing a lot of camps, and I'd go to a lot of guest institutions, and you know, and go to, you know, top 96 camps or Stanford camps, and be the guest infield speaker or be one of the helpers. And that opened the doors for me to move on from Puget Sound. And the head coach at Northern Colorado attended one of those camps, and he reached out to me and invited me to be his infield coach. And so this was a big break for me to go to the Division I level. And there I continued to, you know, try to be on the cutting edge and still honor my roots, you know, so still emphasize securing the baseball and playing catch, but also try to maximize positioning and get creative with drill design and make the most of indoor spaces. And so fortunately for me, I was around two head coaches now, Coach Billings and Coach Iwasaki, who really empowered me and gave me autonomy when it came to defense. And I was fortunate enough to be around some budding young infielders who were also talented. And so we had some defensive success at both institutions. We both broke the fielding percentage records, and that gave me the opportunity to speak at ABCA on multiple occasions. And so at those conferences, as you know, they're pretty well attended by professional baseball teams. And then that was kind of my gateway into professional baseball. I served as the lower level infield coordinator for the Cleveland Indians, now Guardians organization, then the overall defensive coordinator. And I was around a lot of veteran infielders, Carlos Baerga, Robbie Thompson, John McDonough, Travis Fryman. And they were so gracious in taking me under their wing and showing me the ways and the challenge of the journey of being a professional baseball player. Because being an outsider to professional baseball, oftentimes coaches will fall flat on their face when they don't have the respect for the journey and the respect for the difficulties that come with being a player. And for me, those men, they were my teacher. They really helped acclimate me into professional baseball. And then finally, the last step is that I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to join Gabe Kapler in San Francisco and be his bench coach and his infield coach. But the jerseys, the size of the stadium, all those things have changed along the way. But my routine, my responsibilities have largely stayed the same, coaching infielders and coaching overall team defense and trying to find kind of modern ways to measure and push the envelope forward, but to get good at old-fashioned things.
Yeah, that's incredible. You mentioned a few times that you have some measurements, right, for infielders. Can you tell us more about that? What does that mean?
Yeah, no, that's always a tough question. So defensive metrics have been around, as you know, for years and years, and their reliability is very, very poor, to be really honest. They've changed rapidly. They're missing components. They're missing positioning. They're missing the appreciation of how difficult an off-balance throw is, right? So they've never been trustworthy in itself, and the eye test has always been a really important component to infield play. However, in modern infield play, Major League Baseball has so much center of mass tracking, right? So they have these devices in ballparks that measure where an infielder is, measure where the ball is, and measure how much time he has to get to the ball. So now there's some nuanced stuff that's missing, like hops, as you know, but at the very least, it's a much fairer play grader. And so each organization has their own, you know, in-house stuff that, you know, we don't talk about publicly, but the public facing metric, outs above average, which you can find on Baseball Savant, is a great database for a young player, a parent, and a young coach to go in there and just look around and see how they allocate points and see how they measure arm strength and foot speed. And so that's, for me, as an outsider to Major League Baseball, and then as a Major League Baseball employee, that's a really useful tool to kind of blend and see, okay, I really like how this guy looks when he fields. Let's see how he's graded. Okay, and then let's see where am I alike and where am I different as you're calibrating your own ability to evaluate infield play.
Okay. So you're getting measurement and information, data, matching that with your coaching eye. Right. And like, I like this guy, I like his positioning, how he gets in front of the ball, where he fields it. Right. All that stuff. And then you're like, you go look at those numbers. You're like, okay. Like, so it's kind of, would you say confirmation that like, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this?
Yeah, I think it can be confirmation, it can be cross-checking, it can be a little bit of everything. I mean, you were scouting at the dawn of the models, right? Or people, the computer is deciding the value on a certain player. And so sometimes it can be useful in the sense that it helps cross-check, or it makes you look twice at somebody that you wouldn't have, or
Mhm.
check yourself. And then sometimes you can get lost in them too. And
Yeah.
so instead of thinking of it as a replacement of a human, I just think about it as another human in the conversation sitting at the table. Someone else that I can sit there and bounce ideas off of, just like I would another coach.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So you initially started at the D3 level of coaching at Puget.
Mhm.
So that was kind of your first introduction. And then for those that like, wow, this guy went from player to coach at the D3 level to now all the way to the big leagues. You had a couple stops in between there. And tell us your story about how you got to University of Northern Colorado with Coach Carl.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I was lucky enough to speak at a lot of different
Yeah.
at camps, and I spoke on infield play at a camp he attended in Southern California. And so he was there to observe and recruit players, and he watched the way I worked and described infield play, and wanted to take a step forward defensively. And he had a really strong staff in place with RD Spees and Patrick Perry, and he had an opening. And so I kind of fit that mold, as he had a hitting coach and a well-established hitting coach, a well-established pitching coach, and he brought me
Mhm.
into to coach his infield. And that was been a very, very common theme for me in my career. Is I've been very lucky in the sense that I was always in the act of trying to be good at my current job. I was never trying to get the next job, but
Mhm.
someone happened to be watching, looking for the next job. And
Okay.
I was just so, blinders up on the current thing I was doing, that I wasn't caught trying to make an impression or put on a show. I was simply trying to coach the guys in front of me, and oftentimes somebody was there who noticed. And so I'm grateful that those things have happened in my career.
Yeah, so you were completely just focused on your personal process, getting your players better, teaching them what you know, not worried about, okay, how do I get to and the next level D1 or even into pro ball? That just happened. Now, how
Yeah.
long how long were you at Northern Colorado?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I thought it was unlikely to get a full-time job coaching college baseball in the very beginning. So when I
Mm.
became full-time at Puget Sound, that was worthy of
Yeah.
celebration. And then um, when I got the opportunity to be a Division I coach, I'm already coaching a level player that was far
Mhm.
superior to my ability. So that was a dream come true. So every one of these stops, it was like my World Series already.
Yeah.
Right, as
Okay.
a kid from a small town up, I never looked beyond them because I didn't think beyond them was realistic. Right, when I was a Division I coach for those 3.5 seasons, um professional baseball is a pipe dream. Right, I didn't
Interesting.
know what a
Yeah.
coordinator was. I didn't know what a rover was.
Okay.
I didn't know what, when they called me and talked to me about roles, I had no idea what was going. I knew what I was passionate about. I knew portions of the job I enjoyed, but I didn't know what that looked like.
Okay.
And
So
so
so you didn't have a dream board on your wall sitting next to Gabe Kapler in the dugout.
no, I did not. I All I wanted to be was a full-time collegiate defensive coach.
Okay.
That's it. Like, do you have the ability to support my family and do baseball every single day? Because
Mhm.
not too many people on earth get to do baseball every single day.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was my dream. And I thought it was going to take years and years to accomplish that in itself.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's kudos to you if you fast forwarded that process a big time, right?
Oh, thank you.
So you went to Northern Colorado, you were there for a few years, and then like you said, your head's down, you're just doing your work, and then all of a sudden a big league team comes calling, right? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm driving home. It's almost Thanksgiving. I think 2017. I thought it was a prank call. I didn't know exactly what it was about, and the
Yeah.
direction it was going, and the assistant director of player development and I just chopped it up and talked about infield play and thought processes and things like that. And at the end, they said, "Hey, would you like to interview for a job?" I'm like, "Sure." I mean, I didn't own a suit. I'm from Hawaii. If you're going to go something nice, you had an aloha shirt.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So they gave me, like 7, 8 days notice before I was in Progressive Field. So I'm like trying to buy something off the rack. I can't even have it altered,
There you go.
and then I got to watch a YouTube video. Okay, you have just this button, but you sit down, you undo it, So that's how unlikely I think.
One-handed. You got to figure out
Yeah,
how to do
exactly,
one-handed. Yeah.
exactly. That's how unlikely I thought moving on was. It wasn't even a thought.
So this is the Indians that call, right?
Mhm.
So they call, you have your interview. I'm sure you wowed them to death and they offer you a job. Where did you first start out?
So I started out being based at the Arizona facility, which I tell people all the time is like one of the greatest jobs in minor league baseball because you sleep in your own bed every single night,
Mhm.
right? Your longest road trip is from Goodyear to Scottsdale.
Yeah. So
You're
this
talking about
this is
15.
rookie ball, right? The
Yeah, so
rookie
yeah,
ball.
exactly. So I did
Yeah.
extended, I did rookie ball. You had a bunch of guys just at the start of their career that were very comparable in age to college players.
Mhm.
So it was a perfect first role. And then I kind of expanded into short season a little bit. Then did instructs, was able to kind of have a leadership role in instructs, and then that kind of scaled it as time went on to across all levels.
What was it like coaching that kind of first year professional, that either high school kid that's 18 or a college guy that's 21, 22? He's got some experience. Did you find differences right away with those kind of age gaps?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing right away was the ceiling, right? As you know, right? When you walk, you walk into a GCL, AZL game and people expect it to be, like some kind of sloppy, poor level of baseball. Every single guy on that field has the potential to be a major leaguer.
Mm,
That's why they were internationally signed. That's why they were drafted. And so
mhm,
I think the overwhelming thing was the ceiling ability, the things that people were capable of doing. The 60 runners and the 60 throwers and
mhm.
they're everywhere. There's bat speed, there's arm strength, there's physicality everywhere. And so I think the thing that was overwhelming for me is the spectrum of the floor, right?
Okay.
Like there
Yeah.
were guys who were tooled out who couldn't do the same thing every day. And then there were guys who were kind of lighter on tools who were extremely routine oriented. And so there are different things that you have to do with different folks. But it was far different than collegiate baseball, where you had recruited all of these gentlemen and you're just building to win as many games as you can on a given weekend. This
Yeah.
was more about like a long time journey. This was my first time entering an environment where we're kind of forecasting 3, 4 years down the road. And we have time to pick out singular things along the way because we're not worried about completing a bunt defense on Friday night.
Mhm.
And so I think that was the biggest switch. And then I think the other part of it that's the big change is that um, you're a co-pilot with the player, right? It is a professional player and it is his career. He's not an amateur player and you're not responsible for him. You're partnering with a professional player on his journey. He's got to drive,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
you're there to be the guardrails, to give advice, maybe say, hey, pull over here, let's take a break. Hey, take this turn, right? But you can't grab the wheel. You can't grab the wheel for him because it's the most important thing he's going to do career wise um, at that point in his life.
It's really interesting you said that, grab the wheel. Have you seen that happen? Like instances where like a coach is just way too involved?
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. I think every coach is guilty of that because
Sure.
you have the passion, right?
Yeah.
Where it is, hey, I want to help you. And I know something you don't know, and we go. And I think coaching without context happens all the time.
Mhm.
And not only in professional baseball, but at every level, because coaches, they think that they show that they care and show that they know by immediately teaching. And so something that I try to do is always kind of give myself that space and wait a little while. But yeah, it's something I witness pretty often. It's something I've been guilty of myself. I think we all have.
Yeah, and imagine with coaches too, right? You're still pretty young, right, at this point, and you're growing as a coach, trying to learn what's my voice, how do I present my information? And the videos that I've seen and watched of you, like you've nailed it, right, in regards to how you present, right, how you talk to your players. Is that like anything, it's kind of that growth mindset. Is that something that's taken a lot of time and reps to get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's taken a large amount of reps and it's taken a large willingness to accept feedback.
Mm,
It just become part of my process that after sessions, the coaches who are around me, the younger player, the veteran player, I'm going to ask him, hey, how'd you think that went? What was the best part for you? What was the worst part for you? And
Yeah.
I think I've honed my message and my communication style by allowing that period of reflection and feedback and not being so prideful
Mm.
in
Hmm.
the way I think I've executed to not take that. And I think that that's kind of what's come out in the wash in present day is the impact of so many people along the way because I was willing to ask those questions and listen.
Hmm. Yeah, and from what I gather, you still have you're at the highest level now, right? Still the humbleness to continue to learn, right, and continue to grow. You mentioned guys like Baerga, Travis Fryman, John McDonald, who is one of the
Absolute wizard.
like good guys that played in my era. Like, dude, John McDonald was incredible, right?
Yeah.
What if you can remember any of some of the things that they taught you that you weren't quite maybe aware of at that point?
Yeah, like I think I'll give a couple of different examples. So Travis Fryman is an incredible deliverer of information because he's elite at simplifying.
Okay.
And so he'd always say, son, you got a big toolbox, but today let's just pick one or two of them to use out there, right? You
Yeah.
know, and then he'd also always tell me, hey, don't go too fast that you can't take us with you too. Right. And so he was elite at remind me to simplify and remind me to slow down.
Mm.
Right? Because he'd been through the ups and downs of his own journey as a player and then a coach. And so he knew when to, hey, it's time to slow down. It's time to cut this session off. That was his major impact for me. John McDonald is just an absolute wizard, as you know. And so for him, a lot of things are about feel
Hmm.
and trying them out and doing those things. And he likes options. And through Johnny, I learned that good can look a lot of different ways because if you saw John McDonald on the street, you wouldn't recognize him as a major league shortstop,
Right.
right? He's a shorter, stockier gentleman, but he can do some incredibly dynamic things. And so he kind of reminded me, all right, you shouldn't be boxing people in to specific boxes, right? You should be trying to maximize people's ability and give them more options to make a move.
Mm.
And then for Carlos, um, he was amazing for me into giving me the insight into the Spanish speaking player,
Hmm.
their journey, and what that experience is like. And then he was also great anecdotally about talking about how different techniques work for him, right? And we talk about, I remember a day where we're talking about the thumb down flip to the second base.
Hmm.
I'm talking about, okay, that's something you use when you're kind of in that mid distance. And Carlos, reminds me, no, don't, when I would close into the lane and I'm right next to the runner, that's another time when I'd use it, even though I'm close because I'm too closed off with my shoulder to open my hand this way. And so it's those little experiential things you pick up along the way that I was drinking out of a fire hose,
Yeah.
for those multiple years with those guys, because every day there was a lesson like that. And every day there was a new chance for me to integrate that into my teaching style.
Fascinating, man. That's so cool. Yeah, I was drafted as a shortstop, right? And I spent a little time in the infield in pro ball, and um, what I see now, like with I guess some of the routines, like I've seen I've seen Ron Washington, right, getting down on your knees, hitting the short fungo. There's certainly different routines I think that have developed, right? Do you have a specific routine you do during the year with like is everyone a little bit different in their routines in that regard?
Yeah, when I think about drill work, especially pregame drill work,
Mhm,
you think about things in two categories. The vitamins, right? That fits everyone, right? It's
mhm.
not going to hurt anyone. You take it, you're going to be slightly better. And then the prescription medication that you take and you're going to be better, and I take and it's going to make me sick.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you kind of have to bucket those activities. And when you're talking about the 1% of the 1% in the major leagues, there's a lot of prescription medication when it comes to drills because there's a lot of guys who are different. They have outlier behaviors. And so every guy's routine has some element of hand activation, right? Like the wash drills, right?
Mhm.
Like the Perry Hill wide base funnel activities. That's just all to prepare your hands, prime your hands and your eyes for that final hop, those last two hops, so you can problem solve. So you can go forward and backwards, you can backhand, you can forehand. And then every guy's routine for me has some kind of element of footwork patterning,
Mhm.
right? So as you know, there's a variety of angles and routes you can take on the infield. And guys have strong routes and weak routes, strong patterns and weak routes, weak patterns. And so we kind of spend some time hammering and preparing for those weaker patterns, because those are the ones they do less intuitively. And then every guy has some element of full speed reps in their pregame, something that's good. They're going to see the ball come off hard, it's going to skip, and they're going to have to make a decision at a game speed. So that way, the first game ground ball isn't the firmest, isn't the toughest, isn't the rangiest one they've got in a given day. And so there's slight variance between each guy in an infield, and their veteran status versus their younger, their workload. They just played 5 games in a row versus they had 2 nights off, and everything in between. But that's kind of the basic foundation for each of our guys' daily routine.
You mentioned some like weak patterns, right? Some guys have, some don't. Can you give us an example of what that looks like?
Yeah. So, let's say balls to our glove side, right? There's a bounding ball, which I'm going to play through one-handed and close my shoulder and throw. Then there's a bounding ball where I'm going to play through one-handed and I'm going to close my shoulder and throw on the run. And then there's a rolling ball that's going to beat me to the spot and I'm going to spin. And then there's a hard shot that I'm going to give ground on and then close my shoulder and throw. And there's a hard shot I'm going to give ground on and spin, right? So now to one quadrant of my body, there's 5 different patterns I just listed. Right. And your average shortstop, whether he's 12 or he's 32, is going to do 3 or 4 of them better than he's going to do the 4th or 5th one.
Yeah.
So that's an example.
Yeah.
A lot of young infielders, for example, if I'd never seen an infielder play before and he's only played the middle of the field, oftentimes his weak pattern is going to be the hard shot where you go backwards, because you're just so geared on going forward and going downhill and charging the ball, and that's what you've done since Little League. That becomes your tough pattern. So that's a very common weak pattern. Same to the backhand side. You have that same variety of angles and routes. And oftentimes you'll find more weakness on the backhand side for 1 or 2 reasons. Young players are coached away from backhanding, right? They're told to get around it as much as possible. And so it reduces the quantity of reps they get on backhands. And the other reason, and this as a scout, is that arm strength is such a determining factor in the ability to play a position.
Yeah.
And balls to the right that create momentum away from first base are that separating factor. So some of those guys have weaker backhand patterns because they know they can't make the throw, so they're going to rush through it, right? They're not secure enough in their ability to throw it, and so it hurts their ability to catch it, and squirrely things happen. But that's an example of what I mean by patterning. And so what we try to do is bucket those patterns and have an understanding of which are infielders strong and weak ones, and kind of go after. And then the goal is, in practice, increase the rep quantity of the weak ones. But in the game, whenever you can, set up the strong one. Take the route to showcase your best pattern, your best glove skill, your best arm angle, your best throw.
So you can show it off to the guy that is interested in signing you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So you spent some time in Cleveland, right? Now was that mainly all with the minor league system?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough that, that Tito and his staff are not only wildly successful, but they're very welcoming. And so I did a handful of trips up there and and spent some time in big league camp, just observing and catching up faces and hitting the random fungo and sitting in a meeting. And that was a really good exposure into what day-to-day looked like, what the workflow looked like, what the stress looked like on guys, what the hours spent looked like. And so that's kind of the start of my big league exposure was with Tito and his staff.
Yeah. How's the fungo game?
Well, I enjoy hitting a fungo. That's something, it's something I love to do, and the different shapes and the different fly ball shapes and ground ball shapes. So I'm not impacting the baseball as much as a large human being, but I would like to think I can control it.
After when I got into the coaching side of things too, the fungo, it's fascinating, right? Of trying to learn how to hit it, because the guys would say, well, if you're a right-handed fungo hitter, right, you got the bat in your left hand, you're throwing under to go, right? I was always the opposite, because just guy was like, well, I don't hit fungo, so I flip with my left hand.
Exactly.
So which way do you go?
I go the across.
So you go the professional way.
Yeah, right? Allegedly.
Is that a big thing in pro ball? Like you have to go
because there's an entire generation of veteran coaches who got World Series rings. a lot of success under their belt that toss like that. So you're not going to say one's better than the other.
Yeah, so that whatever works for you, right?
Yeah, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think for my key to this whole thing is everyone wants to look pretty hitting fungos, and then they hit the same ground ball to every guy.
Right.
And what we're
Right.
actually trying to do is create rep variety. And so what I'll tell people who are first learning to hit the fungo is toss yourself the pitch that you would have hit to that position.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like toss
Yeah.
one low and away and hook it.
Okay. Yeah.
Toss it in and spin off of it. Right?
Right.
Because that ball is going to actually be more representative. You were never trying to ground out the shortstop. Right. And so if you toss yourself a meatball, it's going to be a weird ball flight.
Sure.
So, I'll
Yeah.
toss it high, I'll toss it low, I'll toss it away, I'll toss it in, and I'll try to give those guys different looks with a different bat angle. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's fun. I love it.
no
I can
doubt.
hit a mean fungo. Love it.
That's awesome.
So you spent some time with Cleveland.
Mhm.
Now you get the call to come over to San Francisco. You get a big league opportunity. What was that call like? Who did you talk to? And what was that conversation about?
You know, coincidentally, and Cap has talked about this publicly, but he interviewed me for his original staff in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah.
Um,
When is
but
it? Yeah.
I was only 29 at the time, so it would have been quite the move. But that's how he and I really got to know each other. Is we spent a lot of time during that process, and at the end of that, he gave me a pretty positive review and just said, "Hey, this now's not the time, but your time will come." And I just thought it was a nice thing to say. And
Sure.
for all I knew, I was never going to interview to be a major league coach again. And then 2 really short years later, here he is in San Francisco. And so that's how that transpired. And then there was much less, you know, pressure isn't the right word, but it was much less uncertainty this time around because it was the same gentleman and the same process
Hmm.
been through. And so that's kind of it. So it's almost like I interviewed for the job 2 years before, to a
Yeah.
certain extent. Obviously
Yeah.
there were some refreshers and he was continuing to be in contact with folks and track my development and making sure I was improving on the things that I need to improve on. But the bulk of the work in terms of that relationship was done during the Philadelphia process.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah. So I think Gabe's about 2 years older than me. We played roughly around the same time, and I remember we played in the Hawaiian Winter League together back
Yeah.
in. That's when I met Carl. He
Mhm.
was the
Yeah.
GM of
Who's the GM?
the
Yeah.
Honolulu Sharks, right?
Yeah.
And that was the first time I got to see Gabe. Like he was always in the gym. Like you walk past the gym, he was there, right? It was crazy work ethic in that regard to love the gym.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's still that way,
All the same.
right?
Yeah.
What's he like? Because you hear a lot of people talk about Gabe and his work ethic. What do you see there?
Well, I think there's first thing is there's like the intensity of the quantity and quality of work that raises the bar for everybody around you, right? His bandwidth spent on being the manager of the San Francisco Giants is maxed out in the course of the day. So how do you not, as the first base coach, as the third base coach, as the pitching coach,
Hmm.
as an analyst, as a clubhouse guy, not rise to that challenge as well? It's contagious. So that's the first thing. The second thing is he's a really deep thinker, right? And so as prideful as he is, and as important as his playing career and being like a tenured big leaguer is to him, he's always thinking deeply about better ways to do things and different ways to do things. And he's not afraid of that. And so, I commend him for that. And I think that thought process is what I'm a product of, and the reason I had the opportunity for my role. And then the third thing is he's does an amazing job empowering people around him to have autonomy. And so not only do we each get a significant list of responsibilities, but he doesn't micromanage you in those moments. He tries to tee you up for success and have one-on-one conversations and put the right people around you for you to succeed. And so I'm very grateful for all three of those aspects: to be with somebody who works as hard as he does, to be with somebody who's open-minded, who's not stuck, one way and doesn't, he's not without convictions. He's not wishy-washy, but he's the good kind of open-minded. And then third, to be with somebody who, trusts the people they work with. And so I couldn't really pick, two better managers to be around at the start of my young career in terms of Tito and
Yeah.
then in terms of Cap.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's really cool. And so this is what your third year going into San Francisco?
Fourth.
Fourth year now,
Yeah.
right? I'm sure it's flying.
flying by.
right?
Yeah.
Going crazy. And so, what does that look like for you as a coach, right? So a lot of times we have coaches that you have your bench coach, third base, first base. So what is your complete role there with the Giants?
So as the bench coach, obviously coach infielders, um, coach overall team defense, and then serve as the manager, as Cap's thought partner in terms of in-game strategy.
Mm,
So kind of having that steady flow of conversation in terms of what they're going to do next, what we're potentially going to do next, who needs to be communicated with, what things need to happen, as kind of the game's transpiring. And so that's kind of the largest three responsibilities. And then, as you know, as the bench coach, I run spring training and then kind of build a day-to-day calendar in terms of the pregame work.
yeah. So the bench coach has huge responsibilities, right? Of getting it all put together, the managers entrusting you to like, dude, go get this done.
Yeah, no, it is a substantive role. I would say a lot of times that it's, there's like a COO component to it.
Mm, mhm.
But fortunately for me, um, as much responsibility as I've been given, I also have been given a significant amount of support and teammates, right? Because you think when I first came up, Ron Wotus was still here, and he'd been Dusty's bench coach and Felipe's bench coach and
Mhm.
Boch's bench coach. So you have a guy sitting there who's got a PhD and doing the job, right? And so he's taking some of those tough conversations and he's guiding me as well, so that alleviates that. You have that institutional knowledge, 30 years sitting there.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, on the other end of the spectrum, we got folks like Alyssa Nacken in our dugout, who's incredibly
Mhm.
organized and an elite communicator. And what she lacks in the formal, professional playing career like myself, she makes up for in her ability to execute tasks. And so when you're partnered with numerous folks like that, it makes the job far easier to execute on a day-to-day standpoint.
Yeah, that's right. You brought up a good point. So she's one of the first female coaches in the big leagues, right?
Mhm.
So how is that perceived and how is that taken with all the players and the coaches?
Yeah, well, I think there's two groups of people that need credit for when anything goes right in a major league clubhouse, and the first are the players. As you know, it is the players' clubhouse in the major leagues, and for us, we had incredibly open-minded, winning baseball players. Right? They weren't open-minded, losing baseball players. You're talking about guys who won a lot of games: Longoria, Crawford, Posey, Belt. And so when we walked into the clubhouse, they knew what winning looked like, but they also weren't afraid to try something new. And so they really set the bar in terms of opening us all with, welcoming us all with open arms. Cap, myself, and all the way to Knack. And then the other primary group that needs to be commended is Knack herself,
Mm,
right? She's so elite in weaving in and out of spaces. People, the word feel is talked about so much in
mm,
professional baseball, and she oozes with feel
yeah.
in terms of the flow, and she's so observant of our guys and the staff, and she knows who needs what at a given time, who needs this, like, for her to plop down next to you when you're eating lunch, and who needs space.
Right.
And I think if we all have even had 10% of her skill, there would be a better coaching staff. And so those two factors are our clubhouse being a really strong clubhouse when we first got hired 4 years ago, and her ability to navigate all the variety of types of interactions that happen in pro baseball are what made it wildly successful so far.
Love that. That's awesome. Very cool. So yeah, you've going on your fourth year with the Giants now. The first guy that comes across to me is Brandon Crawford, right? When I think of an elite infielder, tell us about Brandon. What makes him so good?
Well, I think Brandon, as you know, is a large human being. He's no small man, but
Mhm.
he's so incredibly graceful for a guy his size. And so what Brandon does is he completes a really, really high rate of plays at the fringes of his range. Right. So there's guys who are incredibly rangy, but at the fringes of their range, the final 10 feet in either direction, they only make 50, 25% of the plays. So they
Yeah.
get to a ton of balls, but they don't convert those.
Mhm.
Right. That's when the careless errors comes in. That's when the wild throws come in. Brandon Crawford, he might not get to the same amount of balls as that profile, but the balls that he gets to, he converts into outs. If he gets the glove on it, he has a movement solution for it. He can spin, he can throw off the back foot, he can jump, he can slide, he can dive and pop up, he can barehand it. And so he's really, really special in that regard. And I
Hmm.
mean, that's and then the other thing that makes him special is, man, he loves to play defense.
He
You
loves
know,
it. Yeah.
he loves to play defense. He told me once, because there's, as you know, the star players in the major leagues, when they take BP, guys will come out and watch the ball fly. You're kind of, oh gosh, that's Miggy, that's Pujols, right? I wanted to see this guy take BP. The folks in the stands come early to watch them take BP.
Yeah.
His pregame ground ball routine, Crawford says, is his BP home runs. Not that he's incapable of hitting BP home runs or home runs in general. He's more than an accomplished hitter, but his ground ball routine is his time to show his skill, and I've never seen anything like it. And so that's the other factor that makes him so great at defense, is because his care level is off the charts.
Yeah, and it seems like too when he loves it so much. He's kind of the guy. He likes to do some trick plays,
Yeah,
right, and kind of do those things. And are you a believer in, because some of the stuff you see on TV, right? These guys are diving, they're flipping behind their backs, they're doing all these crazy things, and then you hear a conversation. They're like, "Well, yeah, I practice them."
yeah.
Right? Do you guys practice those type of plays? Is that a lot if you do, or
I think it's within reason,
yeah?
right? Like, I think in baseball, there's the low variable stuff and the high variable stuff. And those
Mhm.
weird one-off things, the bare hand, the behind the back, the glove flip, those are great athletic plays. They don't happen as often. And so it's about mastering the low variable. If you can make the routine play and you can convert the outs that you need to convert, then you can continue to spend more time maintaining athleticism and promoting new skills and new moves. So it's kind of you got to crawl before you walk. And
Sure. Yeah.
a lot of these guys like Crawford, they've mastered the crawl. When the ground ball gets hit to them and it's a routine ground ball, unless something weird happens, you're out.
Mm.
And so he can take the time to practice these specialty skills and maximize his range in that way, and then slowly kind of expand what's considered routine for him. And so I am for maintaining that athleticism, and I am for trying different things and tough and fancy plays whenever possible and whenever appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your take on, because I've worked at facilities before, and you said you've worked at a ton of camps, I'm sure with a lot of kids. Like I'm picturing in my mind, like when someone fielder goes to field a ground ball, we grew up, we're like, okay, alligator hands, like this. And a lot of guys teach here, right? Where it's a little more here. What specifically do you teach in that regard?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a couple of things, right? One of the first things is there's multiple ways to field a ground ball, and you can have a two-handed bias or a one-handed bias.
Hmm.
Right, so there's a handful of ground balls where they're what I consider 50-50 ground balls. The short up that arrives perfectly at the point of your triangle, in your fielding position. The rolling ground ball that's not hopping at all, kind of a nice, easy, low, long hop. There's no rhyme or reason to do one or the other. And if you were had of a little bit more of a two-handed bias, then maybe the proximity between your two hands and the angle of your top hand would be different than you're a guy who's going to catch all of those one-handed,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
so there are certain major leaguers who play more one-handed, and so they're going to be a little bit more thumbs up here in those moments, right? Because they're going to be working in that direction. And there are certain major leaguers who love to play two-handed, and they're going to be a little bit more here or here or here in those moments. And
Is-
so
Yeah.
I think it's about discovering which version works the best for you, which is going to lead to highest catch rate and the highest level of ball security. And then that's the one you hammer in. But
Mhm.
I'm not a locked in on this guy, that's for sure, just because the lack of athleticism that creates. What I tell kids all the time at camps is, when you break the law in the United States, we put you in handcuffs. Because when you're in handcuffs, you can do less. So why
Right.
would you put yourself in handcuffs on a baseball field? Why
Yeah.
would you limit yourself? Right? Fast exchanges, fast glove moves, most maximum adjustability all comes when your one hand dominates the catch.
Yeah.
And so one thing I'm big on, as opposed to emphasizing the exact angle of the other hand, is allowing them to work independently and not be attached.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's very good. Are you a like I had Perry Hill on quite a while ago, and he talked about his 6 Fs. Are you very consistent with that, with his success? Is there any variations that you do of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the gold standard,
Yeah.
right? Perry was one of the first to categorize, right? And so he's got feet, I believe, is number one. And if you think about all the routes I described earlier and the patterns I talked about earlier,
Yeah.
they all fit in the bucket of his feet,
Mhm.
right? And then he's got field, right? And that's what we just discussed. Sometimes you're going forward, sometimes you're going backwards, sometimes you're using one hand, sometimes you're using two, right? And then he's got funnel, I believe,
Mhm.
right? And funnel is the way he's triggering the exchange, the transfer. And
Yeah.
so I think some people interpret funnel like you're always going to be working backwards when you make the catch. And I don't think that's necessarily the spirit of his word funnel. I think what that's talking about is the transition from the catch to the throw, moving the ball to the middle of your body where you can control the baseball.
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens after you move your glove forward. Sometimes that happens fluidly with the catch. The
Yeah.
better your feet are, the more often that's going to happen fluidly with the catch. And then I think then that adds his fourth F, which is feet, which is that's the second set of footwork, that the post field footwork where you're kind of gaining distance and direction, as he calls it, towards first base. And for me, one subtlety is I like to flip that order, and I like to talk about direction over distance, because as you know, as an infielder, you can't always create distance towards first, but you at the very least have to create direction. You have to have your feet and your hips and your shoulders aligned toward your target to get off a high quality and consistent throw. And then from there, fire and follow. And a lot of infielders are taught to follow their throw, and I think that creates a really soft front side and lead leg sometimes, and that ball dies. And so when Perry describes follow, for me, that means more finishing the throw with your upper half. You're still going to throw into a firm front side. You're not going to run through it, but you're going to maintain good direction and you're going to finish. And so I think um, at its root, like I said, he thought of that perfectly
Yeah.
multiple decades ago, and there's
Yeah.
no reason to reinvent it. All I try to do is think about his framework and create variants off each category.
Yeah.
There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. The
Sure.
things that Brian Butterfield has developed in terms of glove action, and Bobby Dickerson has developed in terms of cueing and practicing, and Ron Washington has developed in terms of establishing that final hot work, and Perry has developed in terms of his framework, those things will stand the test of time. Those guys are the gold standard of long-term major league infield coaches, and I'm sure I'm missing other guys, but I like I said, I don't try to reinvent. I just try to kind of take all the things that they've done and categorize them for my own purposes.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, dude, this has been fascinating. I'll respect your time and we'll wrap this up. But with maybe some final advice, let's say for a young high schooler, a college type player, what advice would you have for him as a young infielder?
Yeah, I think the first thing is developing awareness, right? A lot. We talked about strengths and weaknesses a lot over the last hour, and knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. And one of the greatest harms to a young player of any position is not being aware.
Hmm.
If you're not acutely aware of what your body's doing in space and what you do well and what you do poorly, how do you know what to work on? Right. And so that's the first thing, is if I would tell young players, surround yourself with people and processes that can help you become more aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are. So that's number one. The second thing is, you really are what your floor is. Baseball is a high rep, high sample size sport. We play hundreds of games over a period of time.
Yeah.
And so your weaknesses will always come out in the wash. Your lack of work will always come out in the wash. The ball will find you, those chances will happen. And so establishing routines to raise the floor is really important. Putting in that work so that way on your worst day, you can put yourself in a good position to catch the ball. Right. That would be number two. And then I think the third thing that I would tell young infielder, and it's oddly specific, is that the ability to throw the baseball is a huge limiting factor for infielders at every level.
Mm-hmm.
And treating your arm like a pitcher treats their arm, and understanding your mechanics and long tossing, and doing proper warm-ups and using band work and throwing plowcare balls, and all of these things can create a more durable, strong, and accurate arm, and it won't be a limiting factor. And that will open more avenues to stay on the left side and play different positions and somebody who can't throw. And so those are the three things that come to mind right away, is creating awareness for yourself to understand strength and weakness, clear cut strength and weaknesses, raising your floor by creating really strong routines that you're not going to deviate from. So that way your performance always at least reverts back to, at the worst, you're a productive fielder. And then finally, maximize your ability to throw, both in regard to accuracy and strength, because that's going to create the most opportunities for yourself, and it's going to solve the most problems that happen on the infield. Something bad happens, somebody can throw, can still get off a good one. They bobble the ball puts them in a weird position. Somebody can throw, can still erase the runner. Somebody who can't. So those are the things that come to mind.
Dude, on point, man. This is amazing.
Awesome.
Now you guys know why he's in the big leagues, right? Sharing this stuff with guys every day. So, man, you guys just got a clinic of infield play with Kai Correa. And Kai, man, nothing but the best for you, moving forward. You have a young family, right? A young daughter. Just put her to bed, I'm sure.
Yep.
Right? Very
Yeah,
good.
she's out hopefully for the night.
Well, awesome, man. If you guys ever get a chance to catch Kai, where can people follow you? I know you got some YouTube stuff going on. Where can those fielders follow you?
Yeah, so the Giants do an awesome job of creating those train like a big league infielder series. So they're on YouTube. There's probably over a dozen now, and they do 3 or 4 every spring. So those are always
Yeah.
fun to do with the guys. And then in terms of drill work, there's tons of old charts and diagrams and drill work that I posted between 2013 and 2017 that live on Twitter under the hashtag Friday Fielders. And so if you go on that hashtag, some of those things are outdated. Some of those things I don't necessarily believe in now or do all the time, but it's still a fun foundation to look through and flip through those old drills and take a peek, and maybe it'll spark some inspiration.
Love it. Love it, man. Well, good luck to you. I know you got some new guys, some new blood coming in for your season coming up, and I know you're getting ready to go down to Arizona here pretty soon. But Kai, man, nothing but the best for you moving forward. Hopefully, you guys can do some special things this year.
Thank you, sir. It was great reconnecting with you, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome, man. You take care of yourself. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Man, that was an awesome conversation, right? With Kai. What a good dude. Love how he explains in simple terms just the way to field a ground ball, all the terms he used in regards to creating space, right? You can see the difference when you have a big league coach, his passion, right? The things that he's become. He was a D3 coach who was just happy, right, with being in D3. He really didn't even think about being a professional big league coach or being a pro coach at all. And he focused and he kept his head down and he just did his process and he just loved it, right? He had a passion for it. And somebody else saw the greatness that he was doing and gave him an opportunity. So the Indians gave him a shot. Next thing you know, he's interviewing with Gabe Kapler, right, with the Phillies to potentially get that job. That didn't work out, but he did well. He created a relationship with Gabe. A couple years later, Gabe hires him to be a Giants infield coach. So congratulations, Kai, to you. Nothing but the best. Want to make sure you guys are aware of my high school and college membership, where I coach players once a week, sometimes twice a week, and on the mental game, on live coaching. Players bring their information to me. They bring their questions. We discuss it. We have conversations. We hear other players in the group. So if you want to join my membership, check out mentaledgetrainingcoach.com. Very inexpensive, $25 a month. Come join it. Check it out. Come hear what other players are saying. But I will see you in the next episode. Take care.